Hear you, yeah.
Okay, good. Then I will. Then I am ready to start. Is our entire audience there?
There's a few more, I think, planning to join, but we can start if you wish.
What do you want? Do you want me to wait, or do you want me to start? I think there were also two of my colleagues at least who wanted to join, whom I don't see.
Yeah, and I know there's a few from here also hoping to join.
Okay, so what do you want?
Well, do you want to introduce yourself, a little bit about NLR first?
3 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I can do that. Good. Hold on. There you are. Good. And I think that now you see, all you see is PowerPoint, right? And nothing else.
Yeah, PowerPoint and your webcam.
Good.
Excellent.
Well, welcome to this presentation about Skyboard, the serious game that was created in the MASCA project. It was created by a team from NLR, myself of course, but also Anneloes Mai, who is sitting in the same room here with me, and Johan van der Beek, William Beekhuis, Freddy Nieuwenhuizen, and Anneke Nabbe. And they all contributed different parts of the game. Johan is more the game designer, William the graphics designer, Anneloes and Anneke more the developers of the reflection part of the game. Yeah, shall I just proceed, Siobhan, with the rest? In this presentation, I'm going to tell you more about what serious games are. I'm also going to show you what Skyboard, the serious game, is that we created for MASCA. And we're going to talk about the game material that we have created for that game and how to play the game. And eventually we'll also talk about what the relationship is between training and serious games. And if there's time left, we can also have a brief discussion about what you feel that this game is like, how it should be developed further, and so on. But first, I want to bring under your attention that during this presentation, we will also have a so-called question and answering session. You will see in the chat window that is part of the GoToMeeting software, you will see every now and then questions appear for the audience, for you, that you can respond to and think about. What is a serious game? I see new. Serious games have an explicit and carefully thought out educational purpose, and they are not intended to be played primarily for amusement. So they are on the one hand a game, but they are also something that people can learn from. This is a definition from Mr. Abt from 1970, and since then it is still applicable. You can choose between how simple you want to make the game or how realistic you want to make the game. So you can choose between whether you want a computer-based game or a board game, an old-fashioned board game, or something in between, a hybrid. You can focus on those parts of the reality that you want to train. So in case of our serious game, we chose as reality a part of the airport, but not everything that goes on in the airport. And you can scope between how many entities you want to be represented in that game. So you can choose to make, for example, an airline as one player, but you can also make one pilot a player. So you have a lot of opportunities to choose from in your development of the game. Then those games come with different application areas or objectives. You can use games to select people for specific tasks. You can use them for educational purposes, competency training, and that is what we are going to do today. You can test and validate new principles, so practice, and you can use them for research and development. The thing is that a serious game allows players to experiment with their behavior. They elicit to play and they are fun, and that makes it easier to learn. It is also that not all people read books, textbooks, and not all people learn their skills that they need to master just by reading once about them, but by playing with your skills, experimenting with your skills, experimenting with your behavior, allows you to shape your skills better. And that is what you can do in a serious game. So a lesson can be learned over and over again, and every time it is slightly different because you play the game with different players and you change the rules constantly a bit. Serious games comprise of different elements. As you can see in this picture over here, where's my mouse? Here. You have the simulation model, so a game simulates to a certain extent a particular situation. It also is a game, so it is fun, it has rules. There is knowledge behind it about the environment in which your simulation is running. So in case of an airport, it is about the other aircraft, it is about the airlines, it is about the ways how an airport is run. And you have the didactical principles, so you want people to learn something from this game. So they can either learn how to communicate, as in our situation, but you can also have totally different things that you want people to learn. And they are not necessarily the same size. For example, if you create a game like here in a high fidelity simulator, then you make the simulation part a bit bigger and the game part, for example, a bit smaller. And you can choose, dependent on the type of game that you want to develop, where you want to put the emphasis. This is an example of a game that is a game that has a simulation and a knowledge domain, and it is called Snow White. It is an exercise that NLR organizes every year for Schiphol Airport, where we have the tower simulator, and in this tower simulator we simulate that it is a bad weather condition, lots of snow, so runways need to be cleared, and we invite different people from KLM, different committees, people who need to practice, and they all together are working on this solving the enormous amount of snow problem and setting priorities and so on, and afterwards they discuss. So this is an example of a serious game with a very high fidelity simulator. Then the game development. In case of the game that we were creating, you need a kind of competency profile because we are going to train something for change professionals. So what we initially did is we established what that competency profile should be, what skills and knowledge and attitudes are needed, and how do we translate those skills and attitude and knowledge competencies in the game, and how do you train those things in the game, and eventually how do you get the domain, the aviation domain in our case, in such a game. The design process of the game is as follows. First, you make the analysis of what is the task that the people nowadays have, how do you want to change that task, how do you create that into a game, and then you have that game, and then you iteratively keep on working on that game until you have it in the shape where you want it to be. The high-level game mechanics at some point need to be thought of, and then we make, when we know what we want to train, the decision whether we want a board or a computer game. We decide about the number of players or the roles that you will see in the game. We decide about how complex the game needs to be. On the one hand, people play it sometimes for the first time, and if they play this game for the first time, they need to understand the game. On the other hand, if people play it over and over again, it should not become too boring and too dull for them. So there is a certain level of complexity needed, and you need to find out where you want that to be. And the game duration is important because playing a serious game takes time, and you want not that players need to spend days and days at their offices just playing a game in order to learn something. So there is a limit to how long a game can take. When you have these mechanics in place, just the principle of the game, and it can still be any game, then you start to translate the game to the domain where it should apply. So then we are going to think in our situation about airports or airlines or whatever. Until then, the game could in theory also be a simulation of any factory, shop, government, and so on. Further, the game needs specific events. If you have this high-level description of what you want to simulate, you need to bring in events, specific situations that need to be solved while playing the game. So here again, you search into the domain, what has happened in the past, what are realistic events and what are events that are maybe a bit more complex than the normal realistic events, and you bring them into your game design. And eventually you have a lot of alpha and beta testing, and that is what you see in the picture at the bottom here, where people play the game together and where you evaluate how they appreciate the game, how they score, who wins, who loses, why, what works, what doesn't work. So it's a constant, continuous improvement. In the MASCA project, in the previous webinars, you have heard more about the MASCA. The main aim is to support organizations in the whole air transport system with managing change. And there are different modules in the MASCA project, and I can show you here what those are. And as you can see, there is the serious game simulation module, and that module is connected to the other modules. Important to realize is that serious games do not stand alone, but that they in particular connect to learning and to training, so they support something. So this link should actually be a bit thicker. It's an important link to be aware of. Then there were different case studies in MASCA, and one of those case studies is the introduction of collaborative decision making at an airport. And that is what Skyboard, the game that we're going to talk about today, is all about. CESAR and Eurocontrol want collaborative decision making at all European airports. The reason for that is that Eurocontrol nowadays knows very well when aircraft land and when they take off, but what happens in between is a mystery to them. They want to know more about that. So by working in a structured way like CDM is, you can precisely predict when aircraft will be in the air and when they will land again, and that is nice for Eurocontrol and also nice for the airports, because for them it's also a reason to work more efficient. They can work more efficient if they manage the process better, and if they can make sure that all people who are working are constantly busy with their task and not distracted by other persons or have to wait for other things. In order to better predict when aircraft actually will fly, CDM was developed, and CDM is not the priority of all the stakeholders. Not everyone at an airport realizes this, realizes that there is something to gain for all of them. And that is why introduction of CDM is not just a technical introduction, but is also an introduction of a culture. And this is where this game comes into the play, by making people feel while playing a game what this culture change can do. You can make the introduction of CDM smoother and easier. Skyboard. The game is developed in MASCA, and you can see behind me here how this introduction and development of the game worked. You see here some test sessions that took place at Swedavia. And what is collaborative decision making? Collaborative decision making comprises a number of main characters. The air traffic control, the aircraft operators, the airlines, the ground handlers, and the airport itself, and also the central flow management unit from Eurocontrol. Those four roles are important because we have brought those into the game. And why do we do this? On the one hand, because we want aircraft not to spend too much time on the ground, so to stand here and wait until passengers and luggage and everything is in there, but this process needs to be as fast and smooth as possible, and also because we don't want traffic jams in front of the runway. So if you are better able to predict, the aircraft can depart their gates and immediately taxi to the runway and depart. It's all efficient. So that's what you see here, smoother turnaround process, improved pre-departure sequencing, and as a result a more accurate actual takeoff time. That is the main thing behind collaborative decision making. In the serious game, we make people feel what the added value of that collaborative decision making is so that they are able to adapt that culture of change and an attitude towards CDM, and we gain more support from the stakeholders. There is some momentum needed for change, in this case CDM, and the game is supposed to contribute to that. Skyboard is made for Swedavia, so that is the main customer here in this case. It is a competency-based training, and the target audience are two types of people working at Arlanda Airport. On the one hand, the change managers who need to introduce a change at the airport, and on the other hand, the staff who need to work with the change and accept and work according to the change. The game can be played in two modes, and that's important to realize. There is a CDM mode and there is a non-CDM mode. In the CDM mode, people are enhanced, elicited to collaborate, and in this non-CDM mode, it is precisely the other way around. They are elicited not to do that and to work as much as possible as they do now. And by playing two modes, people can clearly see the difference. They can clearly see that CDM actually improves performance. It also shows that the points that you score in the game are probably higher than in the CDM mode than in the non-CDM mode. The game also includes reflection material to enhance the learning. That's also important because people who play the game should not just play, but they also need to get some feedback about what their behavior does to others, to themselves, how they can change it, what their options are, what the differences are. So the people need some reflection while playing the game in order to be able to shape their behavior and to become more working according to CDM, to collaborate better. So it is all part of the airport CDM introduction and training system. It is not a standalone game, but it comes together with the rest of the CDM introduction at Arlanda. And what I also want to highlight is that such a game is not about exact airport procedures. We want every person who plays the game to be able to represent the pilot, the air traffic controller, the ground handler, or the airport. So every person needs to be able to play the game, and therefore the procedures cannot be exact. The game would be way too complicated if we did that. And therefore we focused on a simple airport in which there is plenty of opportunity to play with collaboration. What the players will learn is to plan, to execute plans, to communicate and to cooperate, and they will monitor the progress, they will look at the planning, and they will share information together. And very important is that they will set their priorities for which aircraft need to depart, at what gate, how do you solve particular bottlenecks or events that take place at the airport. And in the CDM mode, they need to discuss together to solve all those issues, and in the non-CDM mode, they can just do what they find best for themselves without sharing with the others. Examples of bottlenecks are, for example, that there can be a passenger missing, there can be luggage missing, there can be snow on the runway, or even a vehicle. All these events are based upon real-time situations that every now and then happen at airports. For all of those bottlenecks goes that they are first introduced, and if people don't solve them, then they might escalate, so they become worse, and it will take more time and more effort to solve them. So they need to make their decisions about whether they set the priorities towards solving bottlenecks or towards making aircraft depart on time. All in all, they will learn that departure on time matters, and also that collaboration contributes to more aircraft being able to depart on time. The players need a goal and a strategy. The aim of the game is to make as many aircraft as possible depart on time, and people do that by delivering services to an aircraft. So they are basically walking back and forth over the game board, and they are bringing their service to an aircraft. An airline brings pilots, an air traffic controller brings clearances, the airport itself brings the passengers, and the ground handlers bring the luggage. So that's basically what they do. And while bringing those services to the airport, they might encounter the bottlenecks, and they might decide to collaborate or not. They need to have their strategy right. They need to set their priorities, and they need to think about, do I deliver my service first? Do I solve my bottlenecks first? Do I want to help others? That is an opportunity. The airport can decide to help the air traffic controller if the air traffic controller is running out of time. And all players have special abilities, so they have their own stronger points that in the game. Here you see the game board. What you basically see is that there are home bases for all players. Their colored dots represent the air traffic control, the airline, the airport, and the ground handlers. And you see gates where the aircraft are parked, and next to the gates are slots where we can indicate what the moment is that the aircraft need to depart. So we can all clearly see when aircraft need to depart. What the players do is walk back and forth. So for example, the air traffic controller walks from his home base to a particular aircraft, delivers his service, walks back, picks up his service, and then he can walk to the next aircraft to deliver his service. That's basically what happens during the game. At these white circles, every now and then, the bottlenecks will appear. And the bottlenecks make it more difficult to pass. It will either cost points or they can take a detour. So that is where the strategy to a certain extent comes into play. What else? Yeah, all the players have special abilities. For example, the ground handler can walk via this green dotted line. So he has his own route that he can take. The air traffic controller can depart where the aircraft are parked, so he can swap aircraft if that is more convenient to him, or in a collaborative mode to the entire team. The pilot can walk a bit faster over the board because he is not hindered too much by the bottlenecks that are created. And the airport operator has a bit more moves during every turn, so he can also in a way walk faster. On the board you also see a round indicator. There are 12 rounds, and the rounds basically correspond to the moment in time that an aircraft need to depart. So from round 6 on, the first aircraft need to depart. Until then it's just building up, and then in those rounds all the different aircraft need to depart. Here you can see on this line around the board what the score is that the team has and that the individual players have got. So you can constantly see where everyone stands. Taking it all together, this is a kind of representation, a shared situational awareness of the situation, the airport where we are all collaboratively working. In the game, you have got role cards, so every player has a card in front of him in which he can see what his special abilities are and what the different bottlenecks are that he can face. Bottlenecks are this kind of chips, you have got this kind of pictures on them, and they represent particular events. You have got the aircraft cards, as you can see over here, and you can see that every aircraft card has got colored circles where the different players can deliver their service. And you can see that there are some aircraft that have a limited number of services needed, but some of them, for example, have a bit more cargo and therefore more points where services can be delivered. Those aircraft deliver more points, this one 13 and this only 8. So it is important to choose how many points you want to score, which aircraft you give preference. It is not just the time, but it is more than that. Yeah, and you have got all other kinds of indicators in the game. Further, the game comes with a lot of documentation. There is the game manual that describes the rules of the game. There is the game tutorial that makes it, with simple pictures, easier to see how the different moves are made in the game, and there is the educational guide, and that is for the instructor, so that the instructor gets some hints about how to give feedback to the different players at different moments in time. And there are 2 versions of the educational guide, or 2 chapters in the educational guide, dependent on the target audience that you have. You have different kinds of behavior to monitor. I already said that there are 4 different players, and there is also the team. The team has no special abilities, but there are some bottlenecks that can be solved by every player. So some bottlenecks are specific for specific players, like when there is a fire in the dustbin at an airport, then the airport needs to solve that and not the air traffic controller, but there are also some bottlenecks that need to be solved by the team as a whole. Yeah. Once familiar with the game, it takes about 1 hour to play, and you have got 12 rounds, as I already said, and every player during a round has a number of turns. Basically, each player can, when it is his turn, first he takes a chip. A chip is, for example, a bottleneck or an escalation of a bottleneck. He places on the board, and this is how the bottlenecks randomly appear on the board. Then he can perform his actions. He can make 4 steps, and while he is making these actions, he also should consider what strategic opportunities he has got, whether he wants to use his special abilities, like the air traffic controller that can swap the aircraft, whether he wants to solve a bottleneck first, or that he wants to leave it there and hope that it will not escalate any further, whether he wants to use a preparation chip. That is quite important because he can give some of his time to another player, and thereby he can support other players, or in the non-CDM mode he can decide not to do that and make his own life easier, so he can decide to help others or not. The scores. What you will basically see is that collaboration should give better scores. Each team and in each individual gains points. The team gets points when an aircraft has departed, and there are scores subtracted, for example when that aircraft is delayed, or when there are some bottlenecks for the team that were not solved at the end of the game. For the individual, it goes that he gets points for every service that he delivers to an aircraft, and that points are subtracted when he has not solved specific bottlenecks that were there for him or her. In the non-CDM mode, it's simple. The player with the highest number of scores wins, and in the CDM mode there's only a team score, and the team score is the score of that they have gained together plus the score of the player who had the lowest amount of points. And then you will still see that very frequently the player with the lowest amount of points in the CDM mode scores more points than the player with the highest amount of points in the non-CDM mode. What you can do is you can compare scores between games, so you can compare with the previous session, or you can compare scores with other teams and see what type of behavior works better and what doesn't. The reflection sessions. The instructor monitors and provides reflection and interrupts during the game. That can be done either at round 3, 6, 9 and 12, so 4 times per game. It can also be when the players behave in such a way that it would be relevant to discuss with them what they are doing. For example, when they seem to be irritated by what other players are doing, it would be a good moment to interrupt. Players can use that feedback during the game to adjust their behavior, so they can learn from that feedback and see if other behavior gives different results or the same. There is a lot of type of things that an instructor can look at, and to give you just a summary, when people are playing, they can plan together, so they can discuss about it, they can set their priorities, and when the situation changes, when more bottlenecks appear, they could adjust their plans and not just stick to what they already had. They can decide to help each other. They can monitor the situation. They can see how the situation develops and decide whether they want to help another player or not. They can also ask for assistance if they see that other players have more time left than they have themselves. They can show that they are aware of bottlenecks. They do that in their discussions. They can monitor the delays and they can adjust the plans according to that, and they can decide to work on their own goals or to work on team goals or to switch between those. So there's a lot of behavior that you can clearly see in the game and that you can respond upon as an instructor. We have played the game a number of times. We had 3 evaluation sessions at Arlanda Airport. In the first one, we wanted to check the principle of a board game with some Arlanda staff, and they responded to that. In the second time, we came back and we had also Swedavia change managers, and here we showed how we improved the game after the first session, and well, they were more happy with that. And at the last session, we also had other stakeholders than just Swedavia staff to play with. As you can see in the picture over here, this is a picture that represents the second session, so with the Swedavia change managers only, that people in general appreciate the game. The only thing is that they find it a bit hard to learn how to play, but that is just because it is a complicated game. What we found is that a lot of players by themselves at the end of the game started to discuss the relevance of CDM and referred to how they played the game in those discussions. So it was clear for the players in all situations how the game and the introduction of CDM relate to each other, and it facilitated the discussions. Next steps that we have in mind is we want to finalize the design. What you see on the pictures now is still an intermediate design. We're making it a bit nicer. We want to integrate the game more intensely in the rest of the MASCA training program, and we want to proceed the validation of the game, amongst others sessions with students. We are already quite a long way, but we have not analyzed that yet fully. And we want to play the game again in autumn at Swedavia. If you want to know more about this game, you can see that we have already presented it at 3 different conferences. It was not called Skyboard the first time, but still the MASCA serious game. And from 8 to 10 July, it will also be presented at Atos in Toulouse. This is what I wanted to talk about with you. You can read more about the MASCA project over here. Here is our team that I also introduced at the beginning of the game. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Thanks very much, Rolf. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Any questions for Rolf?
Was I so clear?
Yeah, no, very clear.
Okay, if you have time, I can introduce some discussion items.
Yeah, I think Annelies.
We're also supposed to finish by now, I think.
You're okay. No, during your presentation, Annelies has been asking some questions. You've seen those, yeah.
Okay, well.
Annelies, do you want to add anything, or? Okay,
yeah. My microphone in?
So can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good. The echo is a lot less now. So I thought there were some interesting remarks on the question about CDM. I have to scroll back now a bit, where I asked why would anyone be against CDM, and I think you gave the answer that only 7 airports have made the transfer to becoming a CDM airport. So apparently there's still some problem about that.
Yeah, there seems to be a huge problem. I think because this is going on now, almost 10 years ago when Eurocontrol introduced this first, and so various airports are having various problems, but one big thing is that the reluctance to share relevant information seems to be a huge issue, particularly at Heathrow Airport. And then another issue is that I suppose there's no solid business case coming out of any of those 6 airports that are compliant. So it's hard for airports to give this a priority. And then a huge aspect is that just how do these stakeholders collaborate, particularly because in lots of cases they're actually in competition with each other. So how do you establish a basis for that collaboration when there's that element of competition? So there's various issues. And then Eurocontrol probably hasn't given sufficient guidance to date. I mean, they've given that 16 milestone guidance. But yeah, an issue in Orlando was just something that could support the collaboration or more effective communication and coordination across the key stakeholders. So that's where the series game came from in relation to that. And as Rolf said, this series game then will be further developed into a more embedded training program for the dispatchers, for those people actually on the ground towards the end of the year.
Yeah, so that's a training that will take place in November, right?
Yeah, October, November, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, probably the training in the series game is a critical aspect, but probably they may need something in addition to that also to support the actual full implementation of CDM.
So it's still a very important, how do you say that in English, thing that's going on.
Yeah, no, I think so. Because even as a basis, I remember, Rolf, when we played the game first, I mean, there was even because some of the stakeholders at Orlando were saying it was the first time they met each other. So even that very basic, it was the first time that they had sat around a table and actually discussed collaborative decision making, from their own perspectives, and sort of discussed the challenges. So the game, even at a very basic level, was able to sort of facilitate that level of sort of communication.
To open the communication lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as well it helped because there was that fun element. And they were happy to play the game for a few hours because there was that fun element, which was very important as well, I think. So.
Okay. So I think our time is up now. So I thought we had 40 minutes, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. The other thing we could say is that we're hoping to play this game virtually, ourselves and TCD and the NLR team through the video conferencing. So if anybody in TCD is interested, we're going to try and do that, I guess, over the summer. Just to see how can it be played virtually.
Yeah.
So that could be interesting. Any other questions? That was great, Rolf. Thank you very much, and Annalise. So that's the end of this. That's the end of this webinar series. And thank you very much. I'll be circulating just an evaluation sheet, both for the webinar presenters and the participants. And is there an echo here? With the view of running another series in November and learning from our experiences with this program. I hear an echo. So thanks very much, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks again, Rolf.
Thanks, Rolf.
Thank you.
Rolf says bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Bye.
Bye.